Welcome back, Mando.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tagar. Welcome to our 301st fast-dealing and freewheeling episode of Mandovision. I am your host, Narguy Tom, and thank you so much for checking out our small, independent Star Wars podcast. We are so glad you're here with us. Make sure you're reaching out to us on the socials at Mando_Vision, Twitter and Instagram, Mandovision at Blue Sky, and you can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, Bucketheads, we are back for another Star Wars Rebels rewatch episode, and we're going to dive right into it. And maybe you're wondering, hey, wasn't there some Star Wars news that came out towards the end of last week? Yes, there was, and we'll be talking about that in a bonus episode coming out probably in 24 hours or so from when you hear this. So stay tuned, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on said news. All right, but yeah, we're going to focus on our Star Wars Rebels rewatch right now. We got a great episode that I'm really excited to watch. I think it's one of the ones that I would consider this to be a more underrated episode here in Season 2 of Star Wars Rebels. I am, of course, referring to the return of the one, the only, Hondo Ohnaka, a mainstay, recurring character from Star Wars The Clone Wars. And Hondo is looks like he's having a hard time since the rise of the Empire. A lot of criminals are thriving under the Empire, but Hondo may be a little past his prime, but he's still got a couple tricks up his sleeve, still pulling a couple scams here and there. But Hondo was one of my favorite characters coming out of the Clone Wars, and so it's nice to see him return to the fold, engage with Ezra, kind of get into things. Again, I think this is a fun episode. I think this one is vastly underrated. It's unfortunately one of the ones that when you read some of the reviews on certain websites for this episode, it gets that filler label, and I find that completely unnecessary. Mostly because, again, we look at the long view with our characters here on these shows, and Ezra's going through something. Ezra's pretty shook up by what's been going on with the Inquisitors and sort of like the ruthless pursuit of him and his friends and his now adopted family, and it's taking a toll on him. We see it from the beginning of the episode to the end of the episode, and while he doesn't address it head on, he gives us enough insight to let us know that these challenges that are he's going through, the things that are coming after him as he grows and turns into as he is on the path of being a Jedi Knight, it's not without consequences, and he's trying to balance that out, suss through that, and wrap his head around this larger galaxy that he's now part of. Again, he's still a kid, but he was very Lothal based. Like his problems were like around his planet and around his personal, smaller life. But that world has grown. These are his first steps, right, into a larger galaxy, and it's taking some adjustments. So, as great as this is to have Hondo come back, it's also a fun way for Ezra to try and get away from these problems. He even says it in the episode. He's not running away from his problems. He's trying to help someone else with theirs. And I think that's an interesting way for Ezra to sort of process things a little bit, or at least buy himself some time as he's being pulled in so many different directions. But we'll talk about that as we get into the episode proper. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and read our episode particulars for this week. This is Star Wars Rebels, Season 2, Episode 6, Brothers of the Broken Horn. Original air date, November 4th, 2015. Written by Bill Wolkoff, directed by Sal Ruiz. Our primary cast for this episode: Taylor Gray as Ezra Bridger, Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula, Freddie Prinze Jr. as Kanan Jarrus, T.R. Sakar as Sabine Wren, Dave Filoni's Chopper, James Hong returns as Morgan. And we got Ki Sarbagia as Vizago, Keon Young as Commander Sato, Jim Cummings as Hondo Ohnaka, and of course, D. Bradley Baker as Rex. Our plot for this week's episode: Ezra and Chopper take the Phantom to investigate a distress call from a smuggler's ship, where Ezra is tempted to join the crew of Hondo Ohnaka. All right, there you go. There's our plot for this week. Let's go ahead. Let's get into the episode proper. You know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets, and let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off. You're going to have to relocate the covert. This is the way. This is the way.
So we catch up with the Spectres on the planet Gariel. We've seen them before there, back in season 1, I believe. And Ezra is engaged in target practice with Rex, but we find out that it's at the expense of his Jedi training with Kane and Jarrus. And so this is that tug of war I was referring to, as Ezra trying to balance all these different needs and demands on his time as a teenager. And I think a lot of us, having been teenagers at one point, can relate to the demands placed on us at various times, the responsibilities that we had to shoulder when really we just wanted to be a kid sometimes and not have to do some of those more serious things we had to concern ourselves with. And it turns out he's also skirting his other chores as well, because Hera's mad at him for not scraping the ion from the exhaust ports. And again, Ezra at this point is feeling the strain of having to be more responsible than maybe his age would normally warrant if it wasn't a time of tyranny and evil in the galaxy. You know, he could just be a kid if things were normal and not the way that it is. But he doesn't have that sort of choice, right? So he has to just learn that balance. Then you factor in the way that his perception, the way he perceived the galaxy has been expanded and continuing to grow. And figuring out his place in said galaxy as he follows the path of the Jedi. And now he is pursued and hunted by Inquisitors and Sith Lords and all kinds of other things that he had zero idea existed in the galaxy. There's a lot going on for Ezra. And he's trying to process all of it and deal with it as best he can. But he's a kid. And as many of us were, you know, sometimes we choose to ignore our problems, to try and run away from our problems, to try and escape from our problems through various means. But Ezra doesn't have the same same distractions that we do here, so he has to deal with it in his own way. It is. I don't know. I sort of thought it was very interesting. You know, sort of like trying to impose like normal teenager problems in the Star Wars galaxy, something that we haven't seen a ton of. You know, obviously Luke was very, very young when we caught up with him, and you get a little bit of a sampling of him just trying to be a normal teen. But at the same time, he's very much aware of the galaxy at large and what's going on with the Empire and the Rebellion, because his friends are going off to fight in it and to take part in these things. Ezra was more isolated. Remember, Ezra looked inward. Ezra was a fairly selfish person when we first catch up with him in season 1. So he's growing and developing quite nicely. He's just having to learn how to handle all these different things that he was not prepared for. So we get called into the Ghost. We find out from Admiral Sato that the people of the planet Rin are having some problems. They're running out of fuel resources. It's an ice planet. So if they can't get some generators, they're going to have some real serious problems with people freezing to death on this planet. So that's something that they're going to do. It's time to go look for some generators for the people of Rin. Now, Ezra, as we mentioned, we find out after Admiral Sato leaves the room via holocom that he's been skirting responsibilities on the Ghost. So Hera dispatches him and Chopper to resume said chores, which I believe was scraping off the ion debris or something like that from the thrusters. I can't remember exactly what it was. So Ezra's commiserating with Chopper about all these different things that he's sort of processing in his life. And that's when Chopper picks up a distress call from Vizago's ship, the Broken Horn. And so they sneak off in the Phantom, and then they board the Broken Horn, which is in orbit above Gariel. And they find Chopper notices right away that, hey, look, here's generators, the very thing that we need. So Vizago has them. He's obviously well aware of the situation on Ren, and he's going to do Vizago things with said generators, probably for a maximum profit. Also aboard the ship are Vizago's power-drowned droids. So as Ezra and Chopper make their way through to the cockpit of the Broken Horn, they're expecting to find Vizago there. But instead, we are greeted by the return, the reintroduction of one Hondo Ohnaka, our favorite Weequay pirate, who introduces himself to Ezra Bridger. And he's his usual charming, deceitful self. And it is fun. It's a fun episode, friends. And I think that's something that I really want to stress here. And I love the way that Ezra and Hondo are able to interact and bounce off of each other and sort of, what's the word? I'm not quite sure the word I want to use, but Ezra is he's able to sink back into some of his older ways when he was just out for himself. So dealing with somebody like Hondo, who's also out for himself, it's fun to see their sort of dynamic. I also enjoy Ezra pretending that he's Lando Calrissian. Now, maybe not necessarily pretending to be Lando, but that's the alias, the name he gives, instead of saying he's Ezra Bridger. So I find that very amusing. And of course, Hondo has heard of the exploits of Lando. Now, I do have some question whether or not Hondo really believes that he's Lando, but he's going to go along with it for as long as it is required. It is not long before an Imperial cruiser arrives, and with the help of Ezra and Chopper, Hondo is able to launch the Broken Horn into hyperspace to escape the Empire. En route, they cut a deal for the power generators. Again, a fun back and forth between the two characters. And meanwhile, at the same time, Ezra lifts the control that Hondo had showed him that has powered down the droids. Now, again, all these things seem suspicious because it's like, hey, why is Hondo here? He's come up with a story that Ezra, I don't think, quite believes about Vizago losing the ship in a game of sabacc. Now, again, we know ships have traded hands over games of sabacc. So maybe we don't think it's all that strange, but Ezra definitely has his suspicions raised a little bit. He doesn't trust Hondo, but he's going to go along for the ride. Again, he's looking for something to kind of distract himself from his own problems. And again, when they first take the Ghost and they're going up to the Broken Horn, before they know that Hondo's the one on board, he thinks he's helping Vizago. He thinks he tells Chopper, I'm not running away from my problems, I'm helping someone with theirs. And again, Vizago's a character who Ezra feels a debt towards. So he feels like he can pay off that debt now by helping his ship and going on this adventure. And again, I think it's a very reasonable way for Ezra to, again, not necessarily deal with his problems, but still try to be helpful in some way, and just give himself a little bit of breathing room to process everything he's going through. So, of course, now he's on an adventure with Hondo. The ship, the Broken Horn, goes through hyperspace onto the planet Rin, where Hondo has plans for these generators, but he's made a deal with Ezra. But that deal goes wrong quickly as we realize that he is going to sell them to As Morrigan, who we also remember from the Lando Calrissian episode in Season 1, voiced by the great James Wong. So we get to see this character return. And as Morrigan, not a big fan of Hondo Ohnaka. Again, he's expecting Vizago, but Hondo's kind of pulled this fast one. And again, not a fan. He's not a fan. But it turns out that As Morrigan is aware that the Rang clan has a bounty on Hondo. So he's going to shoot Hondo into space and then claim the bounty while taking the generators and not paying any money for them. And then he recognizes Ezra from the adventures with Lando in Season 1. He's going to shoot him into space too. Luckily, this is when Chopper comes in with the 5th generator to cause a distraction. And it's pretty cool. It's a great little fun action sequence here as Ezra and Hondo and Chopper go after Asmorgan and his goons. And at one point, as you know, one of the goons actually gets shot out into space. that can't be good for him. And I also really enjoyed Chopper in a berserker mode here, with blasters on his mandibles. It's awesome. It's really fun to see Chopper just wheeling around on one wheel, blasting after everybody. It's great. We got Hondo saving Ezra, Ezra saving Hondo with the Force, thus revealing himself to be skilled in the ways of the Jedi, which definitely catches Hondo's eye. They chase off Asmorgan, and not before taking his money. So now Hondo has Asmorgan's money. They still have all the generators. And now he knows that Ezra, who has now been exposed as not being Lando Calrissian, is in fact a Jedi. And I like the sort of callback to the Clone Wars, where Hondo's talking about his Jedi friend. And he's like, well, I think we were friends. It's amusing. It's fun. Hondo's a great character. So enjoy this episode. And you know, he and Ezra have some fun repartee. Some fun conversation, some fun back and forth. I love the idea that Hondo floats of Ezra becoming a Jedi pirate and joining his crew. Now, again, we've seen Hondo at sort of like the heights of his powers, where he has a very formidable crew and a large ship, and they have a base on a planet. You know, Hondo, like what we hear from Asmorgan, you know, is not the pirate that he used to be. He seems to have lost his crew. He seems to have lost his own ship. Seems to be struggling in the face of the Empire. But he's still Hondo. Like, despite the fact that he may be beaten down a little bit, it hasn't really diminished his sort of fire, his sort of passion for the things that he does. He still carries on the way he carries on, as we saw him in the Clone Wars to where he is now. Maybe he is a little bit more down on his luck, but he's still pulling schemes and doing doing pretty well by them, honestly. But as they make their way back to the ship, now again, they have the generators, they have the credits. So now that Hondo has the money, he brokers a new deal with Ezra. Ezra's going to get all the generators, except it seems to be that Ezra's maybe just agreed to join Hondo's crew now, to be that pirate Jedi. And again, funny timing with this episode being so close to after Skeleton Crew, when they had basically a pirate Jedi in Jod, in many senses. You know, maybe not like Jedi, but you know, close enough. But a pirate Jedi is kind of fun. And this is when Ezra sort of reveals in a private moment with Chopper, after he sort of realizes that maybe he just agreed to join Hondo, but he's clarifying with Chopper that he has no intention of leaving the Ghost and leaving the Spectres and breaking away from them. But he reveals that, you know what, maybe being a pirate's not so bad because there's no Inquisitors chasing after him. So again, this is that moment where he opens up the Chopper a little bit and kind of shows some of the inner turmoil he's going through. It's at this point that Chopper and Ezra find Vizago, and he tells how Hondo basically tricked him and stabbed him in the back, stole his own ship, locked him up, turned his droids off. So now Ezra makes a deal with Vizago for the generators and to help him get his ship back, because again, he owes Vizago, but Vizago's calling in that favor. But Vizago is very quick to also betray Ezra in order to get back his ship and his generators and to turn that profit and keep that money. Ezra was able to stop the droids, but Hondo, still with the credits and the Jennies, takes off in the Phantom. Vizago throws Chopper and Ezra into an escape pod and launches them back to Gariel, which again, it just amuses me. But Hondo wasn't able to make a getaway. No. The Phantom was already on autopilot. It was going to go back to the Ghost. So when Chopper and Ezra return to the Ghost, thinking that maybe they had been defeated, they find out very, very quickly that Chopper had the Ghost on autopilot. So Hondo's there telling the story of their adventures and definitely painting it in a way that's very favorable to him. that he and Ezra were in on this together, and that's why he's turning these generators over to the rebels now. But we see Hondo. He still has a satchel full of money from Asmorgan. And it's just fun. Hondo, yeah, he loses the generator, but he has a little bit of money in his pocket, maybe enough to get him back on his feet. He leaves the Jennies. The rebels get the generators that they need. And Kanan and Ezra kind of connect, but they don't really address any of Ezra's pressing needs. It's just a fun distraction, and maybe that's why you can write this off. Like, some people can write this episode off as a filler episode because it's essentially a distraction episode for Ezra to be away from his problems. But I think that's a good thing. I think that's part of this character's process, part of this character's journey. It's an important element for him to be able to go on this little adventure with Hondo and Chopper and sort of work through some of the things he's thinking about, or at least forget about the things that he's thinking about by being on these adventures. I think it's very logical in that regards. I mean, Star Wars isn't always about taking things head on. These characters are complex, right? So they have to process things in their own way, and one character can't process things the same way another one does. Like, Kanan might be more tackle things head on, but he's also a full-grown adult. He had his adolescence and is a little bit more self-assured at this point on many, many things. Ezra's still trying to figure a lot of things out. So I like this episode in that regards. I think it shows us a lot for Ezra's journey, and I think that's an important thing. So I dig this episode. It's 7.5 buckets. I almost lean towards 8 because I love Hondo so much. So maybe a nice happy medium, right, between 7.5 and 8, somewhere. It's real close. I'm really leaning 8 just because I love Hondo so much, and I love seeing him back in action. But yeah, a very solid and enjoyable episode, and that is my opinion on that, Bucketheads. So thank you very much. And with that, I think we're going to start wrapping the show up because I got nothing else to say about it. So again, reminders, social media, follow us, hit us up, Mando_Vision, Twitter/X and Insta. Hit me up at Blue Sky at MandoVision. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And please make sure you're liking, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, sweet 5-star reviews. They help the small independent shows like us stand out and not get lost in the insane shuffle of podcast content that exists out in the world. There's just so many podcasts now. Every time you give us those 5 stars, it just fills my heart with joy. Thank you so much. All right, Bucketheads. Please go out into the world. Be great Star Wars fans. The countdown to Andor Season 2 is on. We're going to be here covering Rebels. I'm hopeful we'll get to finish Season 2 before Andor. But if not, we'll just we'll put a little pin in Rebels, watch some Andor, and be back here to pick up Rebels when that's finished. Still trying to decide on my Andor coverage. I suspect we're just going to do the entire 3-episode blocks as one review, as opposed to like individual episode reviews. We'll do our best to keep them separate, but again, it's like mini Star Wars movies every week for 4 weeks, and I'm really excited about it. All right, Bucketheads, again, go out there, be great Star Wars fans, kind, supportive, understanding, and just respectful, That's all we ask here. Bucketheads, you are the best. Thank you. We will be back next week. But remember, in the meantime, this podcast, it can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.